Thank you for taking the time to watch this ProSeries monthly webinar by Protect. The ProSeries content is designed to bring new ideas, strategies, and understanding of topics to help ensure people and processes are safe, equipment is reliable, and companies remain compliant with applicable regulatory jurisdictions. To ask a question, please click the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen to type your questions. We'll answer them as they come or hold them to the end of the call. My name is Nathan Vandergreen, CEO of Protect, and I'll be your host for today. We have another great topic to share with you that we believe is an important consideration for most companies today, and that is sustainability and ESG. The title of today's presentation and discussion is Navigating Your Path to Sustainable Success by Developing a Comprehensive ESG Program. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to the panelists here today. The first one here is Andrea Fogelsong. She is the Vice President and Senior EHS Consultant with Protect, and Ray Kakaval, ESG Director for Protect. I'd ask you each to give a background of where you came from and just to say hi to the people on the call today.
Great. Thanks, Nate. As Nate mentioned, my name is Andrea Fogelsong, Vice President here at Protect. I've been in regulatory and compliance consulting for about 23 years. I've worked in all sorts of industries, including renewable fuels since 2001, oil and gas, petrochemical refining, surface coating, small manufacturing, agriculture. Before that, I did a brief stint at the Region 8 EPA, working in all sorts of traditional environmental regulatory compliance arenas, including Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, which kind of evolved into more of the carbon and sustainability area. I sit on a couple different working committees in addition to being a CARB accredited verifier, Oregon accredited verifier. So, Ray, how about you?
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Welcome in, guys. My name is Ray Kakavelli. I am the ESG Director here at Protect. I come from a company called Airly. We were based in Poland in Eastern Europe. I worked all over the ESG industry throughout Europe, North and South America, and in a little bit in New Zealand and Australia. I've got experience in the US on the EPA and policy side, worked with the state of Arizona for many years, and did a ton of work with the EPA in Region 9 as well. So I have a bunch of experience out here, loads of experience with waste management, oil and gas, a ton of consulting agencies, both domestic and abroad. And I'm excited to get this program going.
Great. Yeah, thank you both. And thanks for joining us today. To start off, can you explain a little background on what ESG stands for and where this concept comes from?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Nate. So ESG, as some of you may know, refers to environment, social, and governance. These services are designed to help companies evaluate and improve their sustainability and ethical practices. The goal is to secure operational, regulatory, and financial sustainability in the long term. The origin of ESG can be traced back to the socially responsible investing movement of the 60s and 70s. This focus on excluding companies that engage in shady activities and deem them harmful to society. For example, the tobacco industry, weapons manufacturers, really anyone involved in the apartheid era in South Africa. Additionally, ESG became more popular among industrial companies as they began to recognize that these issues can have a significant impact on their financial performance. Their reputation and their long-term viability is something that they needed to take into consideration moving forward with a quote-unquote greening market, as shareholders and customers began recognizing that the way that the responsibilities taken into account for the creation of their products, that is important to them. Similarly, companies that have poor labor practices or weak governance structures or poor environmental reputations may face legal and financial risk that's going to affect their outward appearance, their reputation, and that's going to directly impact their shareholders and their customers. ESG has also become a key focus for regulators and policymakers around the world. This is more a regulatory commonplace in Europe, but is becoming more and more popular here in the US. Governments and international organizations are recognizing the importance of ESG issues and are implementing policies and regulations that require companies to disclose their ESG performance and manage ESG risks.
Perfect. Thanks, Ray. Can you
Yeah.
also maybe explain a little more about each category within ESG and really how they affect one another?
Yeah, absolutely. So ESG it's a large umbrella. Environmental services focus more on the progression and improvement of sustainability and ESG initiatives within a client organization. Our team of environmental, regulatory, and compliance experts are positioned to help and further develop strategically incorporate an immense variety of environmental services. We offer additional services through our catalog of existing facility services, but that, for example, one of the more popular services we have, like NDT, destructive testing. If you don't have the correct testing done, then you go and create risks for yourself and your organization. And if those risks begin to evolve into physical problems at your facility, you're going to be putting your employees and your customers and your product at risk. And putting those things at risk is going to affect your outward appearance, your standing with any policymakers in the region you operate, and that's going to affect your bottom line. And that's sort of like a short way of how E is related to the whole ESG side of things. As regulatory and reporting recommendations begin to transition to requirements, you still need to stay compliant with upcoming changes in the reporting and disclosure sectors. For example, the SEC is proposing a new rule for climate risk and disclosure, and SASB, TCFD are just a couple organizations that don't necessarily require ESG reporting. They just set the guidance and recommendations for these reporting. If you could go to the next one for me. As social services relate to the whole ESG framework, an essential part of everything that happens within an organization is how they affect their social impact. So facilities need to understand that to progress their company into the future, they need to demonstrate they're prepared for a more diverse and inclusive market, whether that be related to services offered or the hiring process internally. Diversity and inclusion is one of the most impactful metrics affecting investors and shareholders' outlook on a corporate sustainability. As far as the G side of ESG is concerned, this stands for governance. So that encompasses risk management, accounting integrity, internal operation standards, and corporate governance. This is an essential part of the success of a company. Facilities and company owners and board members need to identify and assess their financial risks and opportunities associated with climate change and develop effective strategies to mitigate internal risks and capitalize on opportunities moving forward.
Yeah, I think one thing to add, Ray, is just when you look at this and when you look at what the sub bullets are for each one of those letters, a lot of facilities, most facilities are doing all of these things already. And a lot of what ESG really represents is how do you report on it? How do you tie it together? And then how do you ultimately have a process in place to continuously improve upon it? So I think it's just unique when you see the bullets. This is an acronym for something that people are already doing parts and pieces of, just maybe not always in such a coordinated effort.
Good point, Nate. It's a giant puzzle piece that a lot of people have been working on for a long time in many industries. It was previously, ESG wasn't always ESG. It used to be CSR, corporate social responsibility. ESG is just more of a, I guess, comprehensive way of bringing it all together.
Yeah. If you could help us understand what's really the driving force behind the current focus on ESG in the US. It seems to be an acronym that just really popped up in the last, handful of years. And if you could just go into that.
Yeah, sure. So ESG, the demand for ESG services is really being driven by institutional investors, pension funds, endowments. These are increasingly incorporating ESG factors into their investment decision-making process. A lot of these investors are seeking out ESG services to help them assess and manage the risks and opportunities associated with sustainability issues, as well as meeting the growing demand from their clients for socially responsible investment opportunities. At the same time, corporations are also recognizing the importance of ESG issues and are increasingly looking for ways to integrate sustainability and responsible business practices into their operations. As a result, there's a growing demand for ESG services among companies seeking to improve sustainability performance, if they want to manage their reputational risk, or if they want to meet the expectations of stakeholders. This is therefore the demand for ESG services in the US is expected to continue to grow in the coming years as more and more investors and companies recognize the importance of sustainability and responsible business practices.
I think there's a couple things that you said, and just to hit on, this has been largely a metric for financial institutions, and I do see and have seen it in several real world examples starting to bleed over into customers. Specifically for us, as an example, we have customers of ours today that are requesting to understand our where we stand from an ESG perspective. They want to see our plan, they want to see our policy. We do believe that no matter what you do, if you sell fuel, if you're a manufacturer, if you're in the energy business, and we have a slide coming up on this, but you will be expected to start sharing this type of information with customers. Suppliers are going to be requested to see this on a regular basis. I have a real world example where we were in the process of assisting with a understanding insurance pricing and negotiation as part of risk control and some of the services we provide. And almost every underwriter and person that we talked to asked what the stance was on ESG in order to make their underwriting decision. So there is significant push out there from multiple aspects, even into insurance markets, of how are you from an ESG perspective, and that is an underwriting consideration today in the insurance marketplace.
Exactly, and what's a consideration today is going to be a reporting requirement tomorrow, and that kind of leads into our next bit of this.
Okay, Andrea, what with the recent proposed SEC ruling, can you help explain to the group here some of its requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as we continue to see this institutional investor and financial push and the growth of the global evolution of these types of programs, we are now seeing a regulatorily required rule with what the Securities Exchange Commission has proposed in a very extensive rule that will require climate risk reporting and relevant risk management processes for publicly traded companies operating in the US. So SEC recognizes that climate-related risks are financially impacting companies, and the current disclosures are not always comparable given the lack of government requirements related to disclosing those climate risks. As such, in their proposed rule, they are specifically looking and targeting information related to climate risk. Information they are seeking includes things like, can these risks and problems have a material impact on the revenue of the company? Do these risks affect a business strategy, business model, or outlook? And do that climate-related weather events have an impact on the business or the financial statements? Specifically, the information that they're going to be looking for includes disclosure of climate-related risks and how those risks are managed, calculation and disclosure of annual GHG emissions, so actually calculating your carbon impact through a specific methodology, disclosing the transition plans to achieve specific targets, including the use of offsets or renewable energy credits. And they're also going to start looking for independent assurance and verification of the climate reporting risks and greenhouse gas impacts. That reporting will begin for larger companies in 2024. Smaller companies have a year-long grace period, so reporting will begin for those smaller companies in 2025.
All right. Andrea, can you go into the major industries that will be looking to use ESG services and really where this hit or has hit or will hit first?
Yes, absolutely. So essentially everybody. ESG is very universal, and ESG practices and sustainable practices can be implemented in virtually every industry and every business across the globe. However, those heavier type industries, energy and utilities, financial, tech, healthcare, consumer goods, these are the industries that are going to probably implement those ESG strategies and climate risk reduction strategies first. So energy and utilities is a very big industry in the fact that they're responsible for a significant share of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Usually here, ESG considerations are used to evaluate a company's energy efficiency, renewable energy investments, and carbon emission reduction targets. Financial and services companies are using ESG criteria to evaluate the risk and return of investment for portfolios and to identify companies that are managing ESG risks and opportunities effectively. In tech, ESG considerations are being used to evaluate a company's data privacy practices, cybersecurity, and labor practices. Healthcare factors that are being used include product safety, pricing policies, ethical work practices, and consumer goods. ESG is relevant in consumer goods industries as companies are responsible for producing and selling products that are safe and sustainable. ESG considerations for the consumer good industry are being used to evaluate a company's supply chain practices, product safety, and labor practices.
And maybe take a few minutes just to clarify the distinction between ESG reporting and sustainability reporting. I know those terms are sometimes used interchangeably, but there are some differences.
They are, and I kind of at one point coined the term ESG. To me, the way that I kind of think about ESG is kind of sustainability plus. So ESG goes beyond the traditional focus of sustainability reporting and your typical environmental compliance, while sustainability reporting includes a piece of environmental compliance. ESG typically focuses on a company's impact from a more global perspective. ESG considers those wider range of factors that are relevant to a company's overall sustainability and societal impact. Sustainability reporting typically involves the disclosure of a company's environmental, social, and economic performance. There are some standard frameworks that have been developed over recent years, including what's called the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI, or the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, also known as SASB. And then obviously your traditional environmental compliance is often wrapped into that sustainability focus. ESG, as I mentioned, it's a lot more comprehensive. ESG goes beyond those areas to include those social and governance factors. As Ray mentioned earlier, social factors may include labor practices, human rights, community relations, and product safety. Governance factors may also include board composition and diversity, executive compensation, shareholder rights. ESG considers those wider range of factors relevant to a company's overall sustainability and societal impact. So really, ESG provides a more holistic view of a company's sustainability performance, and that's where it really goes into identifying other areas of focus and opportunity.
So, Andrea, as it relates to, every company is going to be unique in their own reporting needs. Can you describe some of the typical outcomes of implementing a successful ESG program?
The benefits and value of implementing a ESG program are substantial. Obviously, there's enhanced reputation and stakeholder engagement. Companies that prioritize ESG are better positioned to enhance their reputation and build stronger relationships. Also, too, there's absolutely a generational requirement here. The younger generation and the younger workforce, they care and they see about these types of factors. So there's an optics and a reputational value by implementing these types of programs. You also have improved risk management, as these types of services help companies identify and manage all of these related risks. And they touch on a more comprehensive and vast array of business functions. There's increased operational efficiencies. ESG can help identify opportunities to improve operational efficiencies, reduce energy, water consumption, minimize waste, improve supply chain management. Which all of these also impact your financial performance. So ESG opportunities and sustainability help generate that long-term value by integrating these multi-layered considerations into a business strategy. It improves overall financial performance and reduces the risk of financial loss. All of which leads to a competitive advantage. Companies that prioritize ESG and sustainability, they gain that competitive edge by differentiating themselves from other competitors, attracting and retaining customers, employees, and accessing new markets and financial opportunities.
Thanks, Andrea. Can you explain where a small to mid-sized company should start with ESG if they haven't already? If they haven't already, where would you go?
Yeah, sure. So a good starting point would be to focus on greenhouse gas reporting and analysis, probably scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions reporting and climate risk assessments. These are all a really good starting point for implementing ESG programs. We recommend this for small to mid-sized companies. These components form the foundation for an effective ESG strategy. These offer benefits such as understanding carbon footprint. You're going to understand your target reduction efforts better, be able to drive that more efficiently. You're going to be able to engage suppliers and customers more effectively. You can assess your climate risks, and it can enhance your resilience. You're going to be able to make more informed decisions about your business moving forward, regardless. So by starting these initiatives, any company can demonstrate transparency, responsible resource management, and proactive risk management. This is going to attract investors. It's going to enhance your brand reputation, and it's going to set the stage for a broader ESG integration into your corporate strategy. So this right here is what we would recommend companies just diving right into the ESG world start with. This is what we're going to be offering as kind of like a base service for anyone interested. We're going to handle all of your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We're going to develop the reports for it. We're going to work on your materiality assessments, and we're going to develop a comprehensive climate risk assessment. And as Andrea mentioned earlier, these are actually all going to be required to be reported by the SEC come 2024.
And for those that want to take it a step further, Andrea or Ray, do you want to go into where that path leads to?
Yeah, sure. So more advanced services are going to address the more in-depth ESG issues facing companies, such as their reputation within their community, DEI on the internal side, and supply chain ethics and sustainability. On the surface, ESG starts with the E-services. So all of your environmental stuff are what we want to tackle at the start. At its core, ESG services really are, when you break it down, collecting data, identifying problems, and implementing solutions. So the perfect starting point would be to handle the environmental issues that they may have, but moving forward, community engagement, supply chain management, reputation management, that's all going to come down the road as a result of finding solutions for the initial steps.
And then step 3, and I'll just kick this part off, but detailed reporting, determining how in depth you'll go just on what you want to present. And this is, for lack of a better way to put it, if you are a great ESG risk and you have followed through and are you showing improvements, how you're a good steward of both the environment from a social perspective and governance perspective, you want people to know about it, right? So the detailed reporting is often the marketing for your company that lets the world know and lets your customers know and lets, political realms know who you are and what you're doing to be that good steward. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Ray or Andrea, but that's really what this boils down to. Is it's a structured plan to improve the overall performance of the company. And these things, when they're all tied together and intertwined like this, it creates a manageable structure. And this final piece to the puzzle is just how do you report on it and how do you present yourself to the general public and to your customer base.
Exactly. Yeah, Nate, you hit on it perfectly. The final product at the end of the day for companies implementing an ESG program is going to be that final detailed report, the end of the year, the annual report that they're able to hand to their shareholders, they're able to market to all of their customers. That's exactly it.
Okay. That really concludes the general meat of the topic here today. I want to say thanks to Andrea and to Ray. I know many people are wanting to understand more about regulations, more about what ESG is, what it stands for, the programs, as well as what it takes to implement a program and how it can impact their facility. I'm going to take a moment to just check the questions here and see if any of our listeners have anything to ask. And there's one out here that says, can you help our company evaluate our current situation and recommend a path forward? So I don't know if Andrea or Ray, who wants to take that one.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to take it. Of course, we can definitely help your company evaluate your current situation, and we have plenty of recommendations for your path forward. The basics of any ESG service is to take in data, conduct your analysis, and then identify your problems, whether that's for emissions production or your carbon footprint analyses or internal governance, hiring or DEI. Using that data, we're going to be able to identify the trends in all of your operations at any of your facilities. We'll be capable of picking out the risks and current problems with your internal practices and your environmental initiatives, so whatever it's going to be. From there, we're going to be able to produce mitigation measures and solutions that are going to allow you to lessen the risk, whatever it may be, if it's related to environmental services, if it's related to your community outreach or whatever your reputational risks may be. We're going to be able to help you implement those mitigation measures to thus improve your overall ESG standing and bolster any sort of ESG initiative that you may have.
A couple more questions.
Yeah, I would like to add to Ray's, Nate.
Sure.
So I want to mention too that I think it's important to, I think there's, with the SEC ruling, it very much impacts publicly traded companies. And there's, I think, a little bit of a misconception that says, well, if I'm not publicly traded, this doesn't actually impact me. However, those companies, I touched on consumer goods. If you are part of another company's supply chain, even if you're privately held, you ultimately could become responsible for at least developing scope 1, scope 2 emissions and helping determine what that climate impact looks like. And so even if your palette is not such that you want to develop a full-blown ESG sustainability strategy, having some bits and pieces of a sustainability ESG program in place at a minimum, determining what those scope 1, scope 2 emissions look like is going to become important because as a supply chain partner, you could, even if you're privately held, become impacted by the publicly held SEC requirements.
Yeah, you'll notice a lot of larger privately held companies have already volunteered to do this, even though it's not required. I would give you two very specific examples. As Protect, we are a privately held company. We funnel into providing services for a lot of publicly traded companies, and there are increasing amount of questions and asks and coming requirements for us to have documentation that funnels into their reporting structure. And secondarily, use the example of the fuels industry. So there are several independently small, closely held biofuels facilities that blend their product in with a product produced by a publicly traded company. So there's a lot of things around that avenue that you will become part of their score, of their strategy, whether you are pushing for it or not. It's just something to think about. And we do believe, and it kind of ties into one of the questions here, and I'll pose this to both Andrea and Ray, is what do you believe? Is there any kind of tangible way to think about having a ESG strategy from a financial perspective? Specifically, the question is around, do customers care and pay more if you have an ESG strategy in place? And maybe Andrea, if you could take that one.
I would say 100% yes. And so not only will those partners, like I said, the supply chain partners, it might end up being where they said, we will only work with sustainability partners. If you are willing to jump through the hoops of, determining what your score is, developing sustainability practices, implementing ESG strategies, you can get a premium for your product because you can essentially market it in such a way that, this is produced sustainably, or you can capitalize on those more sustainable business practices. So 100% yes, there is a premium given to those willing to participate in sustainability and ESG programs.
Last question I have here, unless one pops through. Can you give examples of how issues in one category could affect other categories? So I guess I take that as, if you have an issue in the E, how does it affect the S or the G, or transversely? Does anybody have a good response to that one?
Yeah. So that one's pretty basic. If a company has, for example, environmental compliance issues or problems with like implementing mitigation strategies to resolve whatever problem they may have at their facility, they're way more likely to have a poor relationship with whatever government agency they're working with that oversees them. For example, I'm out in Arizona, so that would be ADQ, probably is not a huge fan of the company that's pumping tons and tons of PM and SO2 into the community every year and is operating in a non-attainment area. They're probably not going to have good standing with the government, and that's going to impact their bottom line. They're going to continue to get hit with fees and penalties, and that's going to bleed out into the public. And then the public and the communities they operate in are going to realize that the reason there's this nasty brown cloud over their community all the time is because of the failures of this giant company operating in their neighborhood. And that's, at the end of the day, going to affect the reputation and eventually the attractiveness to their customer base and their investors.
I got one more question here, and this one is actually just one that I came up with, but there's a term out there called greenwashing, and I believe what it represents is people who put on a good front, pretend to be green, and a lot of times you can say that these ESG programs, if you don't want to go in and make these things up and just make it a marketing piece, right? Because you will be found out. Ray, we have a pretty extensive group of customers that are, whether they're in renewables or energy, or they're actively investing in environmental carbon reduction strategies and things of the like. How well poised do you believe the fuels industry, whether big or small, and maybe even broader, the energy industry, big company or small company, is sitting today, and how prime are those if they're not participating in any sort of an ESG platform or approach? How serious should they take this? How urgent should this be for them?
I would say it should be on a scale of 1 to 10, it should be about an 8 to a 9 for them. As I said in the beginning of this presentation, the United States market, it doesn't matter if you're in oil and gas, it doesn't matter if you're in ag, we follow the environmental trends of what happens in Europe. And in Europe, a lot of ESG reporting requirements are already in place in all of the countries participating. And in the United States, we may only have, the upcoming SEC ruling, but 3 years down the road, there's going to be far more legislation out there that is going to require some sort of ESG metric to be reported, no matter if you're privately held, publicly held, if you're making $1 million a year, or if you're a $50 billion a year oil company, it does not matter. I would say the urgency is high right now. If you don't already have an ESG program, if you don't already have sustainability initiatives taking place within your organization, I would definitely get on that train as soon as you can, because in 2 years down the road, when all of these metrics are going to be required to be reported, the services to acquire those reports, gather that data, conduct all the analyses, those services are going to skyrocket in price. I'm not trying to bring like pricing or competition or anything into this, but get in while the getting's good. That's what I would have to say to companies teetering on the edge of whether or not they should begin implementing something like this, any sort of ESG data collection and reporting service.
And I'll add to what Ray said too. It's there's nothing saying that you have to go from 0 to 100 right out of the gates. And so in my eyes, greenwashing, quote unquote greenwashing is probably worse than at this point not doing anything. It goes back to the old adage of mean what you say and say what you mean. If you're going to commit to a program, take it small, from a corporate standpoint, start small, start with what you can manage, and slowly start to build your program and build your culture related to ESG and sustainability. And there's nothing saying that you can't do it in bits and pieces and start small and really develop your program. It's intended to be something that benefits and adds value to your company. And you're not just slapping a label on your company saying that you're sustainable. You really have to mean it and embrace it.
Well said. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I think that one thing to add to that as well, Andrea, and I would encourage anybody on the call or listening to this after the fact. This is something that has a lot of companies, and we work with a lot of companies in the energy space, a lot of fuels companies and power gen companies and things of the like. Companies, whether they are as sustainable or as good of an ESG risk as you are or not, a lot of them are doing this already. So you may be a wonderful sustainability and ESG story, but somebody who's less wonderful may appear better than you already. So I would challenge people who, if you believe you are a really good sustainability risk and a really good steward of your community, the environment, those things, this is something that other companies who may be less qualified to be sitting there are already saying and already doing, and maybe painted in a better picture than you are. So with the start small, I think that absolutely everyone, the best thing to do is start, right? And you may find yourself having a competitive advantage that you are not realizing today through this process.
Yep, absolutely.
Totally agree. Well said.
I do have one last question that popped up, and it is this presentation going to be available to be shared? And absolutely, we record these. We will post it out on our website. We'll also email it out to everybody who attended, as well as others after the meeting. So with that, we'll wrap it up. We went a little longer than we expected, but thank you all for joining us today. Again, we'll post the webinar to our website as well as our YouTube channel. Please share it with your colleagues and as you see appropriate. I'd like to thank Andrea and Ray today for providing us some insight. This is a newer topic to many, and we just appreciate that their expertise and experience is able to help guide people along the path to improving their facilities, improving their bottom line through this process. Thank you both, and appreciate everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.